Hello, you're listening to My Pop 5, the show in which we bring on artists to break down 5 pieces of pop culture that had an influence on them or helped shape them to become the people that they are today. This opening song is called Prove Me Wrong and is written by our guest today, Mr. Dean Stafford. Dean is a singer and songwriter known most for his time fronting the band Pompeii and his current project Early Internet. Dean is one of my favorite musicians making art today, and I can't wait for you to hear about his experience in the industry and how his Pop 5 was the catalyst for who he is today. Let's get into it. Here is our episode with Dean. Hello, we are here with Dean Stafford of Early Internet. He is an incredible musician. He has such a cool story, and we're so excited to have you. Dean, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been so impressed by your work. The first time I saw you play, I remember just being struck by, your tunes. And then when I started to learn more about you and hear about some of your influences, I could start to hear a lot of the things that I've been drawn to musically, and then hear why I was so taken by your performance because of how those influences played in your work. So yeah, I'm just such a fan, and I'm so thankful that you're here.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah. Before we get started, or as we get started, I'd like to ask every guest, if you need to pull out a list or something, you can you list your Pop 5 with no comment, no context? What's your Pop 5?
Back to the Future, Clarity, the album by Jimmy Eat World, Myspace.com, graphic novels, particularly the Scott Pilgrim series, and then Ben Gibbard.
Ben Gibbard, yes. Yep. Throughout all of this, we've never really discussed on the team our Pop 5s or what they are, but I have to say Death Cab for Cutie would probably be on mine. And so it's like kind of the first time that when I saw your list come through, I was like, this is the moment. I remember one of our last conversations that we had right before the pandemic. We were at a party for Henry, who's been on the show, and he was releasing his Henryland video, and we were all there. And I remember right before it started, I came up to you and I came to talk to you, and I wanted to geek out about Death Cab. And so I said, Dean, I got to ask, bud, what's your favorite Death Cab record? And then right as you were about to tell me, we started watching the Henryland video, yeah. And I was like, dang, I didn't get to have that conversation. So no, I guess we have some time to talk about this stuff. But before we get into these things specifically, I'd like to, give the audience a little bit of background about yourself. Can you tell us a bit about where you're from and how you got started in the music world?
Sure. So originally I grew up in a town called Corpus Christi, Texas, by the Gulf of Mexico.
That's where Selena, yes.
Yeah, Selena Quintanilla Perez. Yeah, I graduated from the Selena Auditorium, actually. And then I moved when I was 18 to Austin, Texas, and I went there. It was a small college called St. Edward's University, private college there, and studied acting at a scholarship for acting. But I'd always grown up playing music in bands, mostly punk rock and stuff, and then I continued playing there. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I'm old, but
yeah, no. So I never knew that about you, that acting was kind of your forte. So was it like theater stuff that you started out with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked more traditional acting, more film related acting, but the quickest entry into that world, I think, was like the community theater, high school theater, which tends to be like really cheesy musical theater productions. I did that simultaneously with music most of my young adult life. Yeah, pretty much music. I started playing guitar when I got my first guitar when I was like 6 years old. For my 6th birthday. And then I think I was in productions of some sort from the time I was about 5 or 6. So it's always been kind of at the same time.
Yeah. Were there any roles that you were super proud of or that you remember fondly?
Let's see. When I was younger, I was doing plays a lot. And I remember I was in this play called Dancing at Lunasa, and I had to do this like Irish accent and play a boy and a grown-up man. And I remember I won, a high school theater award, which is like a big accolade, I guess. But I guess I was decent enough to where I was able to land a scholarship to get out of Corpus, which was my goal. No offense, Corpus. I still have love for, where I came from. But
Yeah.
I was, interested in moving to a more cultural city like Austin, and that was the closest in Texas anyway. So, but yeah, I guess that play. And then in college, I got to actually work with like Actors Equity Union affiliated actors who were professional actors in theater, and that was a crazy experience. So there was like a 6-hour two act play called the Kentucky Cycle, and I had to learn how to like clog. There was like a certificate from the clogging president, and yeah, it was wild.
So when you went to school for acting, did you stick through school and finish out with an acting degree in some capacity?
So that's a good question. So about 3 years into it, it was intense. It was almost like a conservatory. Like I hardly even remember if I went to actual regular classes or not. Like that part of it seemed like the actual, academic part of it, I can hardly remember because I was just at the theater like all the time, kind of almost getting burnout. And then right around that time, South by Southwest takes place in Austin, obviously. So my old band Pompeii, we must have played that like for 15 years or something. And anyway, early on, like we had played there, got approached by Eyeball Records. And so we signed a record deal. And all I could think about from that point on was just,
music.
I was in class, but I was miles away in my mind, thinking about lyrics, thinking about the record. And I finally, we had the scholarship review, and I was just like, give this to somebody who like wants it and is going to use it. I'm checked out. I'm going on tour, and I'm going to play in a band.
Heck yeah. So tell me about Pompeii. I'm curious to see, what was the inception of that? Was it just buddies from high school / college? You mentioned 15 years playing that. How did that band start, and kind of what led to some of that notoriety?
The drummer, Rob Davidson, and our dads were actually in the National Guard together. Rob was adopted, but we were always around each other as kids. And so he was just kind of always there. And we both just happened to like the same stuff as we grew up. And I remember being like 10 and, we were both becoming angsty and would walk to the local store we wanted chain wallets, and all they had were like dog chain wallets, but we would like put chains on, and then and then we would go to like the local festivals and stuff. And I remember we both saw this band called Kicking Harold, which is like the most 90s alt rock indie name you could think of at the time. And we were just like eating funnel cakes and sitting on haystacks and watching this song that they played from the radio. And the rest of the night, we just looked through the dictionary and we're thinking of band names. And he got a drum kit. We would record on his sister's little play school tape recorder. I think our first song was called like Ham Sandwich. I don't know why, but we would just start recording. So ever since then, we both ended up at St. Edward's University, played in high school bands, both in different bands because he had moved to outside San Antonio. I was still in Corpus, but tons of bands, just a lot of punk stuff. Clarity by Jimmy Eat World kind of was the catalyst for me wanting to work with like string sections and becoming more kind of like emotional about music, I guess. And in Austin, we eventually at a job interview, I met the bass player who had toured with that band Thursday, and he was friends with the owner of Eyeball Records. He joined on bass, and then I think Caitlin, who was my ex-girlfriend or girlfriend at the time, she played cello in college at the University of Texas, and it kind of all coalesced in those early days. And then we just started touring. Before we even made a name for ourselves in Austin, we were just kind of touring around and got to do our record in Rhinebeck, New York, at a studio called The Clubhouse, recorded Assembly, which is actually its 15th year is this October.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about doing a kind of last minute performance of that record, which is going to be interesting because my voice was a lot higher pitched back then. But
hey man, I have confidence you'll slay it. That's so cool though. Yeah, let's get into that. I want to kind of hear about some of those musical influences. I'm sure we'll weave in and out of both your current project, Early Internet, and Pompeii, and your story. But you already mentioned Clarity by Jiminy Eat World. How did you discover that record, and why do you think it was so impactful for you?
Yeah, that record, I remember it's interesting because I don't really recall the first time I heard it. I want to say I was in my friend Casey Coker. I spent a lot of time with him in high school, and we would listen to punk music and stuff. But I think I remember him putting in Lucky Denver Mint. I don't know if you're familiar with that song, but I remember I really thought like it was interesting the blend between the sort of electronic sounding drums with the regular acoustic drums layered on top and the loops. And I was just like, what is this? Like, you know, and all I remember from that point on was driving my parents' like Nissan Altima champagne colored around Corpus Christi and just having nowhere really to go, maybe driving past the mall or something and just listening to that record. And I think the production, that was the first time I was really like, I noticed production, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just so blown away by it. And then of course, you know, Bleed American came out, and, you know, also a great record. So I think it was just, I think even when I was listening to punk music, which I still love, I think I even had a band called the McFlys, which is modeled after the Ramones, but and Back to the Future. Yeah. But anyway, I think I always even then gravitated toward like the more melodic and the more kind of emotionally charged songs, even though it was faster beats and all that. But yeah, something about Clarity where I noticed particularly the strings, which I think led into Pompeii and wanting to work with strings. And I remember going at my high school, I started recording. I looked up in the Yellow Pages, this guy's recording studio, this old dude from Nashville or something who was still recording on like floppy disk drives and stuff. Bless that man for having to deal with my like 17-year-old songs when he's like older and from Nashville, and they were really bad songs. But yeah, I would hit up the orchestra class and ask them, you know, does anybody want to play? And that was when I started kind of thinking about, you know, composition and stuff and getting string players and recording that kind of music. It was all because of Clarity, you know, which I still love. I still love that record. Yeah,
man. You mentioned a few things that I want to touch on, right? One of my biggest things is even now in 2021, listening back to that record, the music production is like insanely good, you know?
Yeah.
We were listening to like some records from a few years ago, even yesterday, we were listening to like Carly Rae Jepsen record, and like the production just doesn't hit the same. Like you can tell, like after we were playing it side by side to like some of the records that came out recently, we were listening to that Carly Rae record, which is like critically acclaimed, and we were thinking, man, it just isn't hitting the same. Like there's something with production. But then we're listening to the Clarity record, and even still, you know, 20 years later, that thing hits and sounds so good. I was also really confused when I listened to drums. I'm a drummer, as you know. I thought they were doing like reverb or delay or something on the drums on that tune you were referring, Lucky Temperament. And then when I realized and was researching that they just had the two kits running simultaneously, it was just like, oh my gosh, that's such a stinking cool effect.
Yeah, and that's Mark Trombino too, who I guess owns Donut Friend in Highland Park or whatever.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I think he has a donut called like Jimmy Eat Swirl or something like that. But yeah, his production was amazing. I think also it was because at that time, you know, they had signed on a major label, and you know, it was the night. I think the record came out in 2000 or 99, but you know, they still had like big budgets for production. So I think in an interview I saw Jim Adkins say something like they thought that might be the last record they ever had, so they wanted to do everything they possibly could, throw in the kitchen sink to you know, use everything at their disposal. Yeah.
So what were you listening to around that time in your life? Was it, you know, this type of vibe, this, you know, emo pop punk type of feel, or was this something different than what was normally in your songbook?
Yeah, it was a transitional time. It was like, it's crazy, you know, the way that music splinters out, and I can go down rabbit holes of various genres and subgenres forever, you know, and you know what, I think in hindsight, or at the time, there was a part of me that was like embarrassed that I had listened to like, you know, mall pop punk music or something, but you know, I own that now, and I see how it kind of helped shape me, because in Corpus Christi, you know, and this is like, you know, where there wasn't, you know, even Facebook or anything. It was just like Live Journal, you know. So my access to culture and to music, you had to struggle to find it a little bit more. So, you know, we had like Hot Topic in the mall, and which, you know, eventually they sold Pompeii records there.
Heck yeah.
But you would get like these compilations, you know, from various, you know, small labels, and you know, that would kind of lead itself into other genres. Of course, the local shows, a lot of the local shows I would go to were like, when I first started going to shows when I was like in middle school, it was like there were ska bands, like ska punk bands and stuff. But I was listening to, I remember hearing Blink 182 and like Everlong, like on the, on the radio, like Damn It by Blink 182. And, that kind of, and then it lended itself into, I wanted to, study up on like older punk music, like the Ramones and, Screeching Weasel and stuff. And then it led to, which I think I like the melody of that. And then that led into Saves the Day, Death Cab, and of course Jimmy Eat World. So, and I think once I discovered those bands, it just from there kind of, I was more interested in music that more and more had more substance to it, or especially lyrically. Lyrics were at that time in my life, I mean, they still are, but especially at that time in my life when I was like 17, 18, 19, I was just like, lyrics were so important to me.
Yeah. And what's so crazy is that I think it's interesting when timelines kind of all hit at the same time. And what I mean by that is this was so transformative for you in terms of the things you were looking for. And for the band specifically, I understand this was the first record where Jim Adkins takes over as the main vocalist for the entirety of the track. And you mentioned already that they went in thinking, this is it. This is our make or break, kind of potentially our last hurrah. And it was so, life-changing for them as the band. And at the same time, you're discovering them and how impactful it was for you. I think it's so cool to kind of see those parallels.
Sure.
Do you have any like specific favorite tunes, or you mentioned lyrics? Are there any things that stick with you lyrically that you always will look back to even in your own songwriting?
Yeah. I mean, there was a song called 10 on that record, which is just like a loop kind of song. I mean, there's several lines, off that record. I think the one that pops out is like, I can't bring myself to, say it's my own advice I need, or something like that. And I liked that lyric. And then I mean, now I'm like, that I'm put on the spot, I'm kind of like, wait, what are the lyrics? but
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I don't know. In this day and age, not to sound like a curmudgeon or anything, but I feel like it's just, that experience of starting a record from start to finish. And, it's not just about the single. It's like the entire album is like, it's one complete thought. And I just feel like you could put it on and just leave it running. The entire album from start to finish is like, just, it all fits together. It's all one statement, and it's just awesome.
Yeah. And I think this record does a really good job of that, even in hindsight, because for me, at least, I think like most people with this band, the middle is the thing that they think of whenever they think of Jimmy Eat World, right? And it's a good song, but like, of course, like if you were to go back and listen to that record, the one that the middle is on, people are like, you're almost taken out of it when the middle comes on. You can't think of it as a complete piece. Whereas this one didn't necessarily have a hit single, and so you can experience it as a full piece, and you can listen to it. I think even critically, it was like super transformative to separate themselves from the other bands at that time. You mentioned Blink 182s, and I think it was, it changed the sound and led to, advances in bands like Weezer or Snow Patrol or those other bands that I think were kind of not ripping off, but, influenced by, I think, what Jimmy Eat World was doing on this record.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think if I go really far back, it's like kind of early on, my uncle, who didn't have kids or anything, he gave me first CD, which was kind of funny because I'm in first grade and he gives me REM's Out of Time. So it's like I'm 7 years old listening to college rock. Like Losing My Religion is on that album. And like, so I think I was like exposed to like deeper, thoughtful lyrical content and music when I at a young age. So it kind of maybe it just resurfaced once clarity found me.
Yeah, no, and it's such a good record. Some of the things I hear, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in terms of the influence, but what I hear in this record that I heard, I can hear Dean in this, is just all the things they do with like the guitar textures and the sounds from like all the things they're doing guitar wise. And one of my favorite things about your music and your playing is just the way you can make just a palette of sound with guitar tones and guitar sounds. And so is your guitar sound at all influenced by that? Am I making a leap?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they left a lasting impression with, a lot of the kind of like loopy kind of ambient textures. I think they also have a shade of themselves that's like much more rock heavy, like Marshall Stack kind of sounds too. But I think they're like prettier songs, that are more focused on like clean tones are definitely an influence, and the melody behind them. You know, I'm not a shredder like Jim Adkins, like I can't shred, you know, but definitely to some extent. I would say a lot of my sound in the beginning of Pompeii, we were initially looking for a keyboard player, I remember, and this guy responded, I think, to a Craigslist ad that my bass player at the time put out, and he kept saying, I want to, you know, play with you guys. So we were like, okay, let's check him out. Eric, who was our guitar player, he was obsessed with bands like Explosions in the Sky, you know, Mogwai, post-rock kind of stuff, Radiohead. And so in a lot of ways, you know, that led to, it was funny because I came from this like mall rock suburban background, but he came from this like, you know, kind of more highbrow rock scene where, you know, he didn't want to be associated with like a lot of that stuff that I was kind of raised with, but which I'm happy because it exposed me to really cool instrumental music. And he was the one that kind of introduced me to guitar pedals. And so I learned a lot from him because he didn't even know, you couldn't say, hey, play a C or something like that. He didn't know any of the note names or anything, but he knew how to make crazy sonic landscapes and textures. And so that was part of it. I had my first delay pedal. I lived with this randomly when I was like 19, this dude named Chad, who, you know, he was like 12 years older than me and like had played Conan like in 93 and like, in 120 minutes. So he was part of the grunge scene. He taught me a lot about pedals and stuff too. So that at that time I was kind of getting into the delay pedal. And so you'll hear like delay on all over like that first Pompeii record. And, anyway, so that was part of it. And then I would say another big influence on me guitar wise, I would say is Johnny Marr, you know, from the Smiths. And then, you know, a lot of clean tone bands. Like I almost feel like there's kind of an Irish element to what I do, like a Celtic kind of thing. And I think that's why we named one of our Pompeii songs Celtic Mist as a joke, but then the name just kind of stuck and we couldn't call it anything else. So very chimey, you know, the Byrds, The Cure. You know, I love The Cure's tone. So I would say it's kind of all swirled around.
That's so cool, hearing all that stuff. I think everyone's, of course, sound is an amalgamation of all types of different influences.
That really stood out to me on the Jimmy Eat World record. There's a song called Goodbye Sky Harbor. Yes. That one, actually, when you said Explosions of the Sky, I was like, that's exactly what I thought when listening to it. I thought like, did something else? Is this Explosion in the Sky? But no, it was Jimmy Eat World, you know, a 16-minute long epic. And definitely, you know, listening to some of the Pompeii stuff, there is that post-rock, very atmospheric based sound that you guys really delved in, which at the time I think is cool that it was so. People were really just kind of trying to break down the conventions of rock music and trying to do different things with guitar pedals and things like that.
We shared a practice space with a band called This Will Destroy You. And, you know, they're a big post-rock band. So that was kind of cool because we had access to all this cool post-rock stuff, like a vibraphone and like, and then Explosions in the Sky. I ended up randomly becoming friends with some of those guys. And I remember when I first would meet some of them, you know, I was trying not to fanboy, but I would always fanboy. And I think one of them lives here now too. I went to a dinner party with them, Michael, like a while back, and, you know, still just kind of get fanboy out a little bit when I get to talk to them.
Yeah. You mentioned it a bit ago, and for the audience who may not be familiar with how that works, can you talk about what it was like being signed to a record label and touring, and kind of what led to that, and what were you feeling when that was kind of happening to you?
Yeah, you know, growing up in that, again, kind of smaller town, you know, suburban mall rock kind of lifestyle, you know, there's the traditional fairy tale that you imagine of signing to a label and all of that. I remember it was like a South by show that we had jumped on. We had just done a Texas kind of mini tour, and we jumped on this showcase last minute, like 11:30 in the morning at Flamingo Cantina on 6th Street in Austin. I didn't even know that. I mean, there's hardly anybody there, but I didn't know that some of the Eyeball Records guys were going to be there. And I went to go get pizza, and then I just got a text from our first bass player, Shane, and he was just like, hey, meet me at, there was some restaurant next door to where we played, talking to Eyeball or Alex, and he wants to talk about a record deal. And, you know, my heart started racing, and we went over there, and it was an interesting time. You know, it was like 2005. So it was like right as everything was kind of really changing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was kind of like a cruel joke because it was like cool, my records are going to be in like Best Buy now. But it's like, you know, we know how that played out. It's like, who goes to Best Buy to buy their CDs, you know, or CDs at all. So it was cool to kind of see that and be a part of it. I think it was still a time where they would invest in artist development. So, you know, getting to go record at the Clubhouse in Rhinebeck, New York, outside of Woodstock, where like, I think the National recently made a record there, and it's just a beautiful studio. Amazing experience. It was like an old converted barn that we got to stay in, and the snow in the winter of, I think, 2005. And we'd stayed at the Eyeball office, and at that time, you know, all the money that was coming in was from My Chemical Romance, who was on that label too.
Wow. I
remember we spent New Year's Eve there I was getting some food out of the kitchen, and I turned around and like Jeff Rickley from Thursday was there, and he's like, Pompeii, right? And I was like, whoa. And I was like, Thursday, right? I was like, idiot. And you know, he's cool. He's so nice. We gave him a ride into the city in our, you know, shitty van for him to go record. Yeah, lots of cool experiences like that. And so I think that kind of segues into like MySpace pretty
Yeah, let's talk about it. MySpace. So it had a big influence on the band, I'm guessing, but also, you know, culture in general. I think everyone had a MySpace page, and it was the biggest thing. It was, at least for me, in my experience, my first foray into social media in general. So yeah, tell me about your experience with MySpace and kind of why you listed it as something that was impactful for you. We'll get back to the show in just a moment. No, this isn't an ad read, but we do have a couple things that we'd love to share. I've been getting quite a few questions about how you can support the show. The truth is you're already doing it by listening, but if you're looking to do a little bit more, the best way is to support our show is to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Rating and reviewing truly does make all the difference for podcasts. So leave us a review, and in that review, tell us what your Pop 5 is, and we'll read it on the show. Another way to help us out is just following us on Instagram at MyPop5. We post short recaps of the show and include video or music clips that are referenced in the episode. They're some of our favorite pieces of content to produce. Anyway, thank you again for listening, and we'll get back to the show.
Yeah, so I think it was unavoidable at the time, but I think it, you know, when I think about that era and how it impacted me, I think in two ways. And one, it was like, I was sharing a bungalow, a futon bunk bed that my sister had paid for because I was just dirt poor, with my drummer Rob. And in Austin. Mm-hmm. These were kind of like the glory years, you know, we were like 20, 21, and you know, just I wasn't really working. I think my aunt thought I was going to school still, and she was mailing like $500 checks a month, and then I was paying like $200 for rent to stay.
Oh wow.
And then I would just walk to like, I mean, that was really not a good thing for me to do in hindsight. Sorry, Aunt Pat. So and she found out, and it was all good. It was funny though. But I would walk to this little coffee shop patio restaurant thing called Spider House, and it was a really cool place at the time. There would just be like cats wandering around. It was a really cool kind of creative place to just like think. And I'd go and buy these like $1 Imperial pints of Lone Star beer and sit on MySpace and book tours.
Wow.
So I was booking tours, and I was also teaching myself like HTML and, you know, media and marketing, and which led to like kind of what I do now, which is like paid media ads, like digital ads for you know, entertainment clients. So that's kind of helped me in that way. But then, you know, we would get messages from like, I don't know why, but you know, these pop punk kids liked Pompeii a lot, I guess. So we would get messaged from like the starting line, and they'd be like, come to our show with Paramore, and like they'd take us on the bus and, you know, hang out with the starting line, and that was random. Or like Newfound Glory used one of our songs and something, so spent some time with them. Yeah, and then, you know, it was just that whole era, and it was just amazing how you could, you know, search bands based on location and kind of coordinate your tours around there and swap shows. And so it was a good networking tool, and it was a good way to learn kind of like HTML and things like that to kind of make your page look fancy. And you know, that whole era, that and Pure Volume. Like, I remember we were on the front of Pure Volume, and we were like, wow, like we've made it.
Yeah.
And we played the Pure Volume house at South by, sponsored by like Taco Bell or something.
Yeah. And I remember Pure Volume had like some sort of integration or something with MySpace, where it was like on so many different pages. And MySpace was so huge for musicians, you know, especially creators that were just trying to get out there and being able to find new music. You talked a bit ago about before MySpace in general, how did you find music? And that was going to your Sam Goodies and your Best Buys or whatever. I remember taking CDs and they'd have those little readers where you could like scan the CD and it would play like 30-second clips of 3 of the songs on the record. So like that was the only way you could highlight or find music. Now with MySpace coming in, you have access to artist pages uploading their own tunes to their MySpace pages and finding music by searching through location. But then also what people are, I saw this meme the other day about we've reached the time when, people don't realize what MySpace was because people were saying, I wish you could go on someone's Twitter or Instagram and just have like a song playing, and that's what MySpace was you go on everyone's profile and they had a profile song embedded into the page so you could listen to the song that was happening at that time. So,
and I'll tell you that to this day, still, there was this artist and this song that I still remember so vividly, and I loved the song. And the only way I could access it was through this MySpace page, which is long gone. And I've searched all over Google, and I cannot find this artist or this song anywhere, and it drives me crazy. I'm still sad that I can't find that song.
Yeah, it's so heartbreaking when that type of stuff goes away. I remember, for better or worse, like when torrenting and the, LimeWire type of stuff happened, you would find a bunch of different music and, MySpace was kind of the same way. And so like I used to download old records or people would upload acoustic only versions of songs. And like I sometimes would like the acoustic version better than the regular song. And then when MySpace went away or when I lost that download or whatever, I lost my computer, assuming I'd always have access to it again. And when those songs are gone, it's just heartbreaking because there's no access to them. And so it kind of is scary in the instance that if, Spotify or Apple Music, wherever, to just stop doing what they're doing, these libraries and playlists that these people are creating and, treating as sacred gifts like you would a physical record, if that ever gets shut down, it's like your MySpace page where everything that was once there is also gone too. So yeah, it's kind of nerve-wracking about like how people are consuming music, and because you hold that one song so dear, and that's what's becoming of all music right now is, it's not physical. You don't own any of it, and it could be gone if the internet goes.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a similar experience with like a local band, and they were like the only band that had ever really gotten attention outside of where we were, and they were like featured in AP magazine, and I thought they were so cool, and like my sister was friends with one of them, and I would like always want to go to the shows. And now like their music I can't find it anywhere. Like I've gone down a similar rabbit hole, just like searching everywhere, like third page of Google trying to find, like,
I know,
and it's just not there.
I know, it's such a bummer.
What was that band called?
The band was called Burning Daylight.
Interesting. Do you have memories of, when you put down MySpace, it just came to like all the like wonders and things that I loved about it, but all of like the stress that I have about it. Like when MySpace was popular for me, it was middle school, high school time for me. And I just remember the politics of who you would have in your top 8, and if you moved your girlfriend above your best friend or something on the top 8, the types of problems that would come with that. Do you remember anyone at that time who was featured in your top 8?
Oh man, that's hard. I think I remember that I had, definitely, girlfriends of yesteryear or whatever, past. My buddy Jason Segapelli, who is also a musician, I think he was there too. He had, toward the end of the bungalow days, we had not just a bunk bed, but also a cot that was under the bunk bed that he would pull out. And so there was 3 20-year-old dudes like sleeping in a studio apartment. So he was definitely probably one of them.
Man, what I think about MySpace on fondly is you talked about the HTML and building out pages. And for me, that was something that like really stemmed or started the relationship of like me and my high school sweetheart at the time. Our relationship, which in hindsight was like, I don't look back on it very fondly just because like we were both really bad to each other. But at the start of it, we were just really, really good friends. And I remember like just calling and talking to her on the phone and just geeking out about MySpace or changing our layouts and being like, now pull up my MySpace page. What do you think about what I just did? Yeah. And like just going back and forth about each other's like MySpace pages and stuff. And like it's started the relationship. And so when you put this on there, it like brought these memories that I like completely forgot about in terms of like building out these pages and the start of that relationship specifically. And I think it was like so impactful for so many people at that time. And thinking of logging on and seeing maybe your crush or your girlfriend and the online now notification, knowing you could send a message or something like that. Like, man, MySpace is just full nostalgia just thinking about it.
I think that plays into, you know, early internet, kind of the name of, you know, the new project that I have. And it's like, even before MySpace, there was this site called Makeout Club that I was on, and it sounds dirty, but it was just, you know, social media for like alt kids, and you just got a square and a picture, and people would, you know, kind of name drop their favorite indie bands. And what was the other one? It was like LiveJournal, Makeout Club, and then there was Friendster, and then that became MySpace, and yeah, crazy time. AIM, of course, everybody's on AIM,
and it's so crazy that like at that time it was like dial-up internet and you know, very early on DSL type connections to where like to run those pages now they would fly. But I remember like even just loading sometimes someone's MySpace page, it would take a second to just load everything.
There was something so magical about the internet at that time, which I'm sure, you know, early internet, I'm sure you're nostalgic for.
It, you know, it was just like that sound of dial-up or whatever, and nobody could use the phone, I think, or whatever. And then it would just, and then as soon as it's like, you're online, or, you know, and then the promo CDs from AOL were just like getting ridiculous. It'd be like, first you'd get them in the mail and it'd be like 500 hours of free internet, and then it'd be like 1,000 hours of free internet, and then like toward the end of AOL's, you know, empire, it was like 10 million free hours. Please use our service, please.
Oh man, that's too much.
At the time, you said you were booking tours on MySpace.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that's kind of just the norm, you know, like that's how people get their big break, is someone will reach out to them on their Instagram page or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, at the time, did you find that it was the way that you were using it? Was that pretty much how all of the other musicians in the scene were using it?
Yeah, definitely. It was, you know, all the bands that were kind of the tier that we were in, you know, just trying to get gas money to the next town or whatever. You would swap shows that way, and, you know, they'd get you at some VFW hall or whatever, like in Wichita Falls, Texas, or, you know, some secondary market in Illinois somewhere or whatever. And then you'd just kind of be like, hey, we need a place to crash, anybody? And it was all kind of through MySpace for sure. And then, or you know, email too. But
what I remember about MySpace, at least for me, because I was younger when it came out, is it was like almost taboo. So I was like very secretive using MySpace because my parents didn't want me on there because whatever, the dangers of the internet, you know, people weren't really sure what was going on. And so for the initial login that I had, I don't even think I had a picture of myself. It was like some car or something, and I had some fake name and things like that. But anyway, do you remember any of what your profile songs were? Were they your tunes, or did you have something specific that you remember having as your profile song?
Yeah, it feels like forever ago now. I really can't recall. I mean, obviously the band, our band Pompeii, had, you know, our own songs that we had on there, but no, I can't remember what I had.
No, it's okay. One of the things that I remember when MySpace started to lose its standing in terms of popularity, obviously Facebook had a big impact on that. Right. But the things that started happening that made it so unique were the top 8 and the profile song. But then they started expanding that. So then people had like full playlists that they could run on their pages. And then top 8 became top 64 if you wanted it. And so like all these little features that, you know, I think people look back fondly on, they started messing with it and changing it. And people were like, oh, I can't even, you know, log on to MySpace anymore. And obviously the newer, better thing, and I say with finger quotes, you know, Facebook came around and it was more adult, or it was more for college people. And so when we were in high school, we're like, oh yeah, we're going to go to this more adult version of social media and leave our youth MySpace days behind us. But
I think I just remembered, I think I might have had Photo Booth by Death
Death
Cab
Cab.
for Cutie.
Oh, wow.
Oh shoot.
Another song that has, electronic drums and real drums. Yeah.
What a segue.
Well, yeah, you set us up twice now, but let's talk about it. I've been, like I mentioned at the start of this, super excited to talk to you about this, but talk to me about Ben Gibbard, his influence on you, and kind of how you came across him and his work.
Ben Gibbard, I think for a while, I remember when we would get reviews for Pompeii, like whether it was like NPR or like Alternative Press or whatever, they would often kind of compare my vocal style to Ben Gibbard, which I got a lot, which it's fine to be influenced by something, but then you don't want to feel like, oh, I'm just totally derivative of something. So for a while, I kind of wanted to distance myself from it, but truth be told, I think I embrace it now because, and I put him and not Death Cab specifically because I think he was in a lot of ways like a role model. My relationship with my dad was a little shaky, and he kind of serve, even though he doesn't know who I am, he kind of helps serve. Or maybe he's like, oh, it's the guy that tries to sound like me. Great. No, but I put him because he touches across the postal service. He has so many different projects too in general, and I think him as a person, the way that he sees the world and his values and things like that, I think really resonated with me. And his lyrics, of course, I mentioned I was very into lyrics. And also when I would read interviews with him, he would mention bands that I had never heard of, like Red House Painters or whatever, and I would check out those bands, and that kind of like widened my understanding of indie rock. And yeah, so I think there's something about the way that he carries himself and his worldview that I kind of felt like, oh, that's a good kind of role model, I guess, to have. So I had deep admiration, and I just was really, I remember my drummer Rob from Pompeii, he when we were in high school, he would play some Death Cab for Cutie songs from We Have the Facts and We're Voting Yes album. And then on Napster, I would download a couple of songs, I think 405. I really liked 405. But then when Transatlanticism came out, again, talking about a record from start to finish, that is just like pretty much flawless. Although going back to the middle, the song "The Middle" by Jimmy Eat World, it was kind of the same thing for Sound of Settling. I was kind of like, yeah, that's probably my least favorite song on the record.
Yes,
but, it's fine. But I think it has to do with Chris Wallace's production as well. That I just, like the tones, the feel, it just really had this kind of like, even the little like wind kind of sound at the beginning and the end of the record that act as kind of bookends. It kind of just creates this world that goes beyond just dudes on stage playing songs on guitars. It kind of creates this like cinematic world. Maybe it's because I was an actor for a while or whatever, but albums, songs that kind of make you feel like you're in your own movie resonate with me. I learned a lot from him as the way that he structures songs or his melodies. The way that he sings is very conversational and articulate and kind of introspective. And so I think that resonates to some extent. Of course, there's songs he's made that, I'm not a fan of. Definitely that early stuff I really like. And I would love to meet you. So if you're happening to be listening to this, Ben Gibbard, I live in Seattle, Washington now. So
let's go, man. You just got to camp out. No, don't stalk Ben Gibbard. No, man, he is so incredible at what he does. I think songwriter, vocals, his vocal sound is so unique that when you hear him sing,
it's him.
It's him always, as much as they've tried to like change some things, like Chance the Rapper, they did a song with him this past, maybe 2 years ago now. And like they tried to market it as featuring Death Cab for Cutie, but everyone's like, that's Ben Gibbard, everyone kind of knows his own voice. You'd mentioned like him being like a role model as well. And he's also had like such a crazy transformative life. I mean, like most people do. I mean, as long as he's been around and in the industry, but like the way he's kind of talked about the way, alcohol affected him, and he's had the, very public failed marriage that's had an impact. And now he's super into, running 100-mile runs and stuff all the time. And so watching his personal life, be translated through the art and some of the things he's been interested in have like been super inspiring, I think, for me, on top of the music side of stuff as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Man, you mentioned Transatlanticism, and I think that record, like The New Year, That way that record just opens, and it's
a great opening song.
It's so killer. Have you seen him live before?
Oh, so many times. Yeah. So many times. And actually, something fun was that, our first bass player, again, Shane, who, is kind of the catalyst for us signing a record deal and all that, he was friends with one of his old bandmates, this guy Josh, and Josh was in a band called the Velvet Teen that we used to play with. Great band, incredible band. And his wife was Sarah Sanger, and she used to tour with Death Cab kind of on the backside of their operation. But according to them, she found gray hairs in Josh's head and said, "Oh, I have to watch you die," or something like that. And so she's the Sarah from what Sarah said. So I was like, oh, I'm like that much 1 degree closer.
Holy shit. That is so crazy, man.
I hope that's true. I think it's true, though.
I mean, the fact that her name is Sarah, that statement, it makes complete sense that would be the case. That's so crazy. Man, and I'm sure, I mean, that could have just been the naming and stuff like that. The song itself goes through all types of different things, about watching someone die in general. But yeah, so crazy. Yeah, he has so many cool projects. I remember like my first, introduction to them was like a lot of people, I Will Follow You Into the Dark, And so I remember first hearing that song and it was like earth shattering for me. And Plans, that record in general, like I was obsessed with it. But then I was like, I wanted to go to the deep cuts and find some things.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be the hipster Death Cab fan. And I had a buddy named Marcus who like was in a similar vein. And so we found his like one of his first projects, All Time Quarterback. And so like those early Ben Gibbard records for the All Time Quarterback stuff were like so cool. And I just like, I'm such a fan of his work. Did you watch any of his COVID live streams?
Oh, I did. Yeah. Those definitely earlier on in the quarantine were kind of like something to look forward to, to break up the monotony. And I definitely watched those. I mean, it was crazy how many he did, but I just thought it was fascinating to, basically have access to see inside like the room where he's like writing with his, records hanging on the wall and all that kind of stuff. I thought it was very cool of him to do that. So I definitely tuned into those for sure.
Yeah, I did too. I remember one of the most impactful moments on those things is, you're right, it was like something to look forward to in the pandemic. But then I remember one of them that he did, he was like taking requests and he, for the first time, sang Stay Young, Go Dancing. And he had like that little monologue. And for some background for the audience, Ben Gibbard was married to Zooey Deschanel, and he wrote that song Stay Young, Go Dancing about her. And after their divorce, he had never played the song until this COVID live stream. And he had like this long thing about, explaining like how much he tried to avoid this song, but then like, I'm ready to start playing this song again. And when he sang it, it was just like one of the coolest moments, all the stuff that was going on with COVID, knowing his story and how attached I've been to him, and probably like Team Ben not even knowing anything about their relationship and being like, F you, Zooey, you hurt Ben, even though that's probably not even, fair or true. And then hearing him play this song, it was kind of like such a cool moment when he played that song.
Yeah. I mean, he played songs, really deep early cuts, which like they never play live. And so it was pretty awesome. One, to like actually hear him play songs that he never plays that I always wished he would play that he played.
Yeah.
But then also to be able to actually see what his hands are doing on the guitar and like, oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, it was really fascinating.
Yeah, man. Well, I want to go ahead and get moving. I don't want to keep you too late, but let's talk about the two movies here on your Pop 5.
Sure.
First, let's start with, actually, one's a movie, one's the graphic novel, right? Let's talk about Back to the Future.
Yeah, so that one's important because I feel like so much of, I know the 80s are kind of like a trope in pop music, and the people, kind of use it as a crutch with a lot of sounds, including myself. I'm an 80s baby, right? I was born in 84, and I think so much of my identity and personality, and I think carries itself from a nostalgia point of view into early internet movies, like Back to the Future. There was also one when I was a kid called Flight of the Navigator, which I want to recreate the soundtrack of eventually, but very crucial to my early exposure to pop culture. I would watch Back to the Future all the time. I remember I saw the second one in theaters, and Pompeii had a song called Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads, which was in this Jenna Fisher movie called The Giant Mechanical Man.
I love that movie.
Yeah, so at the
Wow.
scene where she discovers it's him, they played the entire song, which was incredible. I remember
wow.
she emailed me. I was at like a housewarming party, and I thought it was a joke or something, or I thought it was spam because I just saw the word Office. But she was like, "I hope you're a fan of The Office because, like, you know, I'm a fan of yours." And yeah, I ended up going to the Tribeca Film Festival for that premiere, which was incredible.
Shit, man.
Got to hang out with her and like Fred Armisen and like yeah, it was crazy. One of those crazy nights. But yeah, that they play that song and Where We're Going, We Don't Need Roads. We tracked it like maybe 3 or 4 takes. I think the second or third one with like no overdubs. And
Wow.
it's an instrumental song on the second Pompeii record called Nothing Happens for a Reason. Yeah, that song. So obviously influenced by Back to the Future. The band, all of our working titles for songs were like quotes from Back to the Future. I have a DeLorean
Oh shit.
on the back of my arm in a
Oh,
weird
shit.
location. I was randomly in Brooklyn
Yeah.
drinking, and I was like, I want a DeLorean right now on my arm.
That's so sick, man.
So yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like anytime it's my go-to. If anybody asks me what's your favorite movie, I'm like Back to the Future.
Yeah. Why do you think it just takes you back to that time, or does it just it's your feel good comfort movie?
It's a comfortable blanket, but I would say I think as a kid, Michael J. Fox, I think he was a short dude, right? I'm a short dude. I'm a petite man, and you know, but he was a cool short dude, and you know, he skateboarded. I think from a it was perfectly cast, and I think from a, you know, movie perspective, it's got every kind of genre. It's got, you know, action, adventure, sci-fi, comedy. I've always loved time travel stories, and the DeLorean is just super cool looking. So I remember right when I moved to Los Angeles, I went, you know, straight to Pasadena to the Gamble House, I think is what it's called, and it's Doc Brown's house in the movie. And you know,
So it's here in Pasadena.
yeah,
Oh shit.
yeah, it's awesome.
We're gonna have to go check it out after we record this.
Yeah, so we're all big Pompeii. We were all huge nerds, you know, for Back to the Future, and I
Yeah.
still am to this day.
What I think is so cool about that movie is the whole, you know, basis of the movie is this relationship between Doc and Marty. And it starts off with no backstory.
Yeah, it's a little weird. It's like, why is this young teen hanging out with this old man?
Yeah, and it's clear that so many people in the neighborhood have a distaste for the Doc character. So
Yeah.
it's even more so like, why are you hanging? Even the people in the movie are like, why the heck are you hanging out with him? You know, but you just kind of accept the
You just go with
relationship.
it, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, what I find interesting is like at that time, Michael J. Fox's career was kind of like, where is this going to go? You know, he had his, you know, youth and did the television shows when he was in his youth, but this was his first huge break that made him the superstar that he is. And so I just think you're right. It was perfectly cast, and just the way he is in that movie, the way he plays Marty McFly. Marty McFly is a character that I think everyone wants to be, you know, like he is not like an asshole in any way. Like he is just, he's cool in all the things he does, but like humble and just like
Unless
really
you call
good
him
character.
a chicken.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, he does such a good job. And like we were rewatching just to kind of refresh ourselves
Yeah.
before we had this conversation. And even just like his clothes and his outfit
Yeah.
and like his sneakers in the first film, I'm just like,
I have
damn,
those.
no shit.
Yeah, they only made 500, and this girl I was dating at the time was so nice and somehow got me access to them. And I'm kind of upset that I wore them once because like, but I want to wear them. I should have got 2 pairs.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's crazy that you can't just buy those shoes again, you know,
Yeah.
because like they're so cool.
That's immediately what I did when I was watching like the first 5 minutes of the film, and you just keep seeing that red swoosh.
Yeah,
And I'm just
yeah.
like, I want those fucking sneakers. So
Yeah.
I just pulled him up. I immediately am like, Marty McFly's shoes.
Yeah.
And like, you can't find them. And like Nike makes like a bunch of like knockoffs, like kind of similar, but it's not the same. But,
Right, exactly.
like, man, just everything he does is so cool. And what I also think is like crazy about that movie is like they do time travel in such a cool way that's like innovative, right?
Yeah.
Time travel has become such a trope that I think like people can at this point almost roll your eyes at it. But
I don't know. I still watch like, no matter how dumb or bad it is, like if it's about time travel, I usually end up watching it anyway, even if it's bad.
Yeah. No, it's such a cool concept. But what I think is like interesting, what I wanted to call back to this is what they did in such a cool way is I think they created tropes that made it that translated it into other time travel movies, where there's almost like a set understanding of rules as to what time travel means. So people understand time travel, I think, because of those Back to the Future films, right? And while it wasn't the first story ever to talk through time travel, like that existed, things like Twilight Zone or things like that, you know, it did it, I think, first in a cool way and subverted expectations, you know, like I love the ending of this film so much because you think he's going to come back and save the day in one way, but then realize that the note to Doc is kind of what ends up like saving it, and you're so shocked thinking it didn't work. Everything that this whole film was trying to do didn't work. And so many times throughout the film, like when you think he sets up that plan to, you know, be mean to his mom so his dad can save the day. But then when that plan doesn't work out, like things end up still working out in ways you didn't expect. So there was potential, I think, for this film to be very, I don't know, cheesy and predictable, but they even, you know, turned all of that on its side, and it's such a cool movie.
Yeah, I mean, it still has its campy moments for sure, but I think it's just that's kind of the 80s in general, kind of cheesy a little bit. But
yeah, but I mean, and that's what people love so much. I mean, all like the John Hughes movies.
That was another one I was going to put. I was about to put The Breakfast Club or Pretty in Pink or something like that. You know, some of the messaging and or the gender roles and things like that, you know, didn't age well with those films. But I feel like, again, going back to like the world that like a film can create or the soundtrack to it, and I think obviously impacted like bands like M83 with Saturdays Equals Youth, that album. Yeah, I wanted to put that one too, but of course there's only 5. But
yeah, I think soundtrack is huge, right? You get the John Williams-y type score with Huey Lewis, you know, like there's like all sorts of things in that soundtrack that I think are, you know, really cool. And right now it's heralded as probably one of the best films ever made, you know, and so many people love it. And it's such a good film.
I had actually never seen it before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
When we were talking about, you know, the topics for this episode, I was like, okay, finally here's like a reason to watch it because I know what it means to pop culture. One thing that really stood out to me is like, oh, all of these tropes or like all of these references, I've seen them everywhere. Like I've seen them in all kinds of TV shows and other movies. I think they even do it like in Avengers Endgame. The whole thing is like, this isn't Back to the Future. Like we're trying to address time travel in a different way, or we're trying to kind of tell our own story about it, but they're using that as a baseline. Like Ryan said, that's kind of the collective understanding we have of time travel is Back to the Future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's permeated like the zeitgeist of the collective unconscious or whatever.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, I think, you know, it kind of transitions a bit. You know, the Marty McFly character, I think, has some similarities to the Scott Pilgrim character in some ways, you know, and just like the, you know, embodiment of, you know, your youth in some ways. Yeah. So, you know, tell me about how you came across those graphic novels and, you know, what did you love about them and how are they so impactful for you?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself as like hardcore a fan as, you know, some people who are into graphic novels who have far more knowledge than I do. But I think in the way that it impacted me is not so much because I'm obsessed with graphic novels, but because this series kind of being a catalyst for a huge kind of change in my direction of my life. So coming back from a Pompeii tour in 2009, we toured Europe for like a month. Right before that tour, this girl that, you know, I was totally in love with, we broke up and I was just devastated. And it was very surreal because like 2 weeks later, I was on a plane going to Europe for the first time and for like a month and playing rock shows. Amazing experience, you know, and I didn't even want to come back. And I came back my car was dead. I had no job, no girlfriend again. 2 of my friends who I'm still close friends with to this day were very kind, you know, and basically took me in as if I was like a cat, you know, and allowed me to stay once again in their studio apartments. This was a common thing in my 20s, you know, being poor and crashing in studio apartments, taking care of me and while I was trying to get my life together. And I remember I was staying in my friend Jacob Hamrick's studio apartment in Austin, Texas, and he is such a creative influence on me, just an amazing human being, and his art, like whether it's music or visual art, is just incredible. I can't speak highly enough of him, but he's been kind of he was a huge influence at this time in my life. So 2010, 2011 were kind of like the rockier parts of my life when Pompeii was kind of like not touring, kind of like a crossroads. Last record didn't come out till 2014. So it was just this kind of like transitional time where I was sleeping on this like deflated air mattress in my buddy Jacob Hamrick's studio apartment. And he would just be drawing comics. And also he had an MPC and his Jaguar guitar, and he would be looping stuff too. All that to say, I was crashing there, and he had a lot of graphic novels. And I remember seeing the Scott Pilgrim series, and he would go to work, and I didn't have a job, and I was just like chill in his apartment, and I started reading them, and I realized, oh my God, this is me. Like I'm sleeping on this dude's floor. My life was just kind of silly, and it kind of made me realize like how silly it was, like the way my life was going. And that was kind of a catalyst for me being like, I don't necessarily want to be Scott Pilgrim, or like even his view of women is, slightly problematic. And I think I had listened to one too many emo songs and was also putting like women on these pedestals and being unrealistic about relationships. And so I was just like, I need to get my shit together. And that's a reason why it was kind of a catalyst or had an impact on me. I eventually got into media buying and finally got stability through that, was able to take care of myself and not be homeless. And so after that, in terms of graphic novels, the next one on the shelf was the graphic novel Blankets. And that I wrote that kind of in 5 minutes, just the basis on an acoustic guitar in his apartment. Sat on that song for years because I think we were still working on Pompeii material, and it didn't quite suit it. And then when I decided I was going to move to LA, and I met Devin Corey, our mutual friend who produces all the early internet stuff, he, I gave him that song. I always liked that song. And so, graphic novels in that regard kind of influenced my music. So, and I even got the author, Craig Thompson, I actually got his blessing. I wrote him on Facebook, and he actually wrote me back and offered to like meet up for coffee or something in Portland. And
wow.
Yeah. So,
Did you meet him?
I haven't met up with him because of the pandemic.
Oh,
but
right.
Now that I'm in, the Seattle area, Portland is very close. So, I think I'm going to reach out to him again. So yeah. So graphic novels, that kind of influenced one of the first early internet songs, and I sat on that song for almost a decade before I recorded it for real.
Yeah.
And it's finally out as a single, but it'll be out on my vinyl in October.
Man, that song is such a good song for one, right? I think Blankets is so good.
Thank you.
I posted on Instagram one night when I was just playing. I played Prove Me Wrong. I was just like goofing around and recorded myself playing Prove Me Wrong. But almost every time to start my practice session, because it's just like such a cool upbeat groove, I probably throw on Blankets just to like have a tune going. And I think it's such a cool song, man.
Thank you.
So did you show him the song? Did he hear it?
My buddy Jacob?
Sorry, no, Craig Thompson.
Oh. Actually, yeah, I think he did. I need to go back and read the message because I wrote him. I want to say like 2 years ago. And then he didn't see it for a while, and then he wrote me back. I bet if I searched for it, I could find the actual message. Yeah, I think I do remember he said it was like a beautiful song, and yeah, it was just very cool to know that. Because I think part of me was like, oh, is he going to sue me or something? So I just wanted to make sure I had like his blessing. And I don't think I showed him the music video though. But I think I'll show him the music video. And I kind of have a desire to maybe go meet with him, maybe even film it and just kind of have like a little interview kind of like this with him and put it on the internet.
Yeah, that's so cool. So give us a little bit of background on the early internet stuff that's, coming out. I know you have 3 songs out at the moment. They're all killer. What are the plans for early internet for the rest of the year? You mentioned vinyl or something in some capacity.
Yeah, so I haven't really made a formal announcement. Everything's DIY, so I'm trying to, and my day job being like marketing or advertising, it's kind of like I'm so busy with that right now that it's taking a while to actually focus on doing this for early internet myself. But my plans are, I'm sitting on the vinyl right now. I already have it in my hand, but It's 8 songs, 4 on each side. I'll release it in October. So initial plans are I'm hoping to release, 1 song. I mean, of course, there's already the 3 that are out, but releasing another song in either late August or early September, and then maybe another one that same month, and then another one in October. And then October will be probably mid-October is when I'll probably have the vinyl available for sale, either on my website or Bandcamp or something like that. It'll definitely be on like streaming platforms and things like that. Yeah, I'm very excited to finally have it out in the world because I've it's crazy. I've been sitting on these songs for so long, but I feel good about them. I'm proud of them. I feel like I still like them even after all this time.
Yeah.
And I'm already kind of working on the second one as we speak. So yeah, it'll be October when it's out, and I'll probably do some shows, hopefully. If I still know any promoters, I hope I do. If anybody's listening, I'm down to play.
I think that we're all in the same boat here, man. We were talking to Lane and our band Pool Toys, and just like even the places we went to go. The first place I ever saw you play was the Hi-Hat.
Oh yeah,
and it's gone now.
I know, it's sad.
So like, yeah, and then another place that I was in town trying to make it to your show, but I had to catch a flight and missed it, but you were playing at the Satellite, and that one's gone too. And so it's just like...
And Pompeii played at the Satellite when it used to be called Spaceland, like in 2007.
Wow.
And so I was really sad to see that go, because a lot of history there.
Yeah.
I remember I hung out with that band Jack's Mannequin there, like when we were on tour, and he
Dark Blue, baby.
He let us stay, because our producer for the second album produced one of theirs, and he let us stay at his house, and I was like, this is so cool.
Yeah. And we could cut this if you don't want to talk about it. What happened with Pompeii? How did that end up
I mean,
wrapping up?
It's funny because we still have like this band group chat. It's just basically memes like all day, like with each other. I think we just reached a point where I think some people didn't see themselves like, at the time I was like, oh, I can just go tour forever. And I kind of, I think I resented some of them in a way for not being able to just kind of go, because I saw the opportunities that we were landing toward the end. We were getting placed on like Under the Radar magazine, and like getting to open shows for like Mew, who we like, and like Of Montreal, and some really cool bands, and playing some bigger shows. And we kind of self-imploded because the way that we approached creativity, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier about, Eric comes from this like highbrow, intellectual, quote unquote, like respected, like serious music background. And I say that with like full respect, because I love all that too. It's a huge part of who I am, like as I've grown up. But there's always that part of me that came from like the skate punk show. I think those creative differences presented themselves because the music that I was writing at 19, when I look back on some of it, it's a little melodramatic. And
who isn't at 19?
But I mean, I'm still proud of it though, and I'm really proud of the last record we did, Loom. I'm very proud of that record. I still love a lot of those songs, and I feel like they resonate with us as adults a lot more. But it was just, as soon as we put on our instruments, it became like work, not as much fun to play. I would still, to this day, I never really wanted the band to break up. And I don't think it ever really did. We're never like, the band is over. It just kind of like, we just kind of kept living our lives. Rob has just had a child. He has a baby now. Colin, our second bass player, who joined like around the third album, he's working at like IBM and like making crazy money probably. And then Eric works in film doing like soundtrack stuff or doing editing. Caitlin, I haven't talked to in a while, but I think she's working with like animals or something. And Shane, our first bass player, he has like 3 kids now, and one of the songs, Interlude for Smith, on the first record, his kid Smith is like almost like a senior in high school, and it's just, it blows my mind or whatever. So I'm just kind of like, wow. I would love to, we've talked briefly about, just here and there about, it'd be kind of fun to like pass a song around, to see what might happen. So you never know. We'll see. I mean, I'm hoping maybe even for this 15th anniversary of Assembly coming up in October that it coincides with the release of Early Internet, that, I might be able to do something and have them join. So we'll see.
Well, the Wikipedia page says you guys are still active.
Oh, really?
It does.
All right. Well, we do like to wrap up with, 5 rapid fire questions here. Okay. So, Dean, if you could be on a reality TV show, which one would you choose?
Okay, so actually, I listened to the one you did with Devin, and the first one, I thought it was the first one he said that like Love Is Blind show, just because it was so crazy. Yeah. But then, and I think my girlfriend was listening, and she was like, "Oh, you should say Hellier," because she's like super into supernatural goblin stuff, and I would fall asleep every time she put that show on because I was just like not into it. I thought it was so silly. But it's like about these dudes that hunt goblins in like Kentucky.
Oh gosh.
So she would want me to say that.
All right, deal. It's in for you. If people have never consumed any of your pop 5, what is the one that you'd want them to go experience right now?
Oh man, definitely not MySpace. I would say let's go with Back to the Future, because I feel like that anybody would like that.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Okay, it's your last show with Pompeii or early internet. You know it's your last show. What are you closing with?
Oh man. Well, if it's Pompeii, we're closing with probably a song called Relative is Relative, which was the last track on the first record, Assembly. Just the outro of that song, like I still think is one of the best things we ever wrote, and it's got the Mellotron that David Bowie used on like Ziggy Stardust album, or it's like So I really love the end of that song still. And then if it's early internet, I'd probably close with what I usually close with, which is a song called "I'm Glad You're Happy."
So good, man.
Thank you.
Okay, same question. It's your last show. What venue and where are you at in terms of where would you play your last show?
I don't. It doesn't exist anymore. But there was this iconic venue called Emo's in Austin, Texas, and Emo's had this outside stage. I saw so many incredible bands there. I would drive up from Corpus during high school to go see certain bands play, and in my mind, it was always like, if I could just play the outside stage of Emo's, it's like I've made it. And I remember we played a sold out show opening for a band called Ghostland Observatory.
Oh shoot!
Years ago.
I love that band.
And we used to practice next to them, and we'd be like, "What is going on next door?" Super nice dudes. But yeah, I remember we played that show, and I just the feeling that you got on that stage, and just all the incredible shows I've seen there. It would I'd reopen that venue,
yes,
and I'd play the outside stage of Emo's.
Perfect. And last one here. What are 5 words you'd tell a past version of yourself?
I guess I would try to say, don't overthink too much.
Okay. Perfect.
I'm a ruminator.
Yes. Lastly, is there anything you want to promote, or where can people follow you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I would want to promote is Early Internet, my new band, which has its first record coming out in October. You can follow me and all the stuff going on there. Of course, on the traditional social channels, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, at Early Internet, and my website, earlyinternetmusic.com, has all of the above. And of course, listen on Spotify or wherever. And so look for stuff coming out from me. There's already the 3 songs out there, but I've got 8 songs total on this final record that's coming out in October, and I'm already working on recording the second one. So more on the way.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Dean. It was such a pleasure. I love your work again. I can't sing your praises enough, but thanks so much for coming. We loved having you.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome. Thanks.
That'll do it for today's show. Thank you so much for listening. Today we're sending you out with a tune that we referenced more than once in this episode called Blankets by Early Internet. I hope you love it. Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at MyPop5. And as always, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next week. And until then, what's your Pop 5? Climb.
They could be moving toward a swift decline. We're short on time.